So this is the web page of Politics for India, and we are using their content for studying. We're giving due credit. I'll also post the link of this page in the description. So, the use of democracy. I just wanted to read about democracy today, and it's an 18 minutes read. So let's just dive in. Democracy can be understood in two ways. I have a different collection of notes from different sources for democracy. So we'll later compare what we study here and what I have in my notes about democracy, what people have said about democracy, the things I've collected. So we'll just go through this. Democracy can be understood in two ways, narrow and broad. Alright, narrow sense, democracy is a form of government. In a narrow sense, it's a form of government which gives opportunity to the people to participate in governance. People participation is considered sine qua non, which is essential to good governance. Good governance cannot be achieved without transparency and accountability. Good governance also requires responsible citizenship. So we'll also make a map, let's say. So there's democracy can be understood in two ways, and narrow and broad. And in the narrow way, it's understood as a form of government, and the form of government which considers it essential for the people to participate. People's participation. People's participation is not just about vote. Now, this is what has actually brought me to democracy, studying democracy right now. People's participation is not just vote. Today, the definition of democracy is being pushed into the narrowly into the narrow spaces between discourses built by words. Anyway, we will form those sentences later, but right now, according to Amartya Sen, democracy has instrumental value. So, people's participation in governance, and then what is good governance? And good governance needs transparency and accountability. Good governance, transparency, accountability. So, according to Amartya Sen, democracy has instrumental value, educative value, as well as intrinsic value. Intrinsic value क्या है ये देखना है अमर्त्य सेन, इसके बारे में अच्छे से फिलोसफी बताए होंगे. Instrumental value है होगा, educative value. Okay, democracy is often considered as intrinsic value. Why didn't we highlight yet? That way we wouldn't have to make the notes like that. Form of government. Anyway, so democracy is often considered a Western obsession. Western obsession and not compatible with Asian values. This debate, the Asian values versus the Western construct or Western obsession, was perhaps between Lee Kuan-yew, Singaporean Prime Minister. I don't exactly remember what the sounds of his name were. Alright, so I'm just showing off whatever I know, and this is all that I knew. However, According to Amartya Sen, it is wrong to think so. In his book, Argumentative Indian, the debate was between Amartya Sen and that Singaporean premier. He has shown how Indian tradition has always been democratic. That's why we call India a democracy. Indian democracy is about there has been a tradition of deliberation, public reasoning. Has there been so? I mean, I am not very sure. If you think about the Chola lands, Chola, all right. I mean, there was a variety of polity in India in ancient times and in medieval times. I don't know if we can really trace democracy's roots to India. Let's just explore with an open mind. He gives the examples of Buddhist assemblies. Those were some, and these Buddhist assemblies were exactly the rebels of Indian system. They were born out of rebellion from the Indian system. And the system that prevails right now, that Indic system is which the Buddhist rebelled against. Indian tradition of pluralism was there. Toleration. This is not questionable, quite questionable. Also reflect the democratic tradition in India. According to Winston Churchill, so Amartya Sen was that kind of person who actually thought of India as the mother of democracy. According to Winston Churchill, democracy is the worst form of government. However, it is the best form of government till we do not discover the better form of government. Experience suggests. See, I don't want to really talk about Winston Churchill in the light of him being shown as a great writer, quote maker. I'm sorry, he was a bigot. He was. And if I were him, I would also have been a bigot. He's that much so. Experience suggests that democracy is the best practicable form of government. Democracy represents the decentralization of power. Initially, power was concentrated in the hands of monarchy. It has led to the power in the hands of a few or aristocracy, and then in the hands of masses. Democracy. Demo. Thus, democracy represents increasing political equality. Increasing political equality, where, okay, if that's the measure, political equality, where everybody gets to vote, and that's the peak of political equality, and that's the charam sima of democracy. Is that so? Political equality is not just vote, that's what is needed to be understood. Broad sense, democracy. So in the narrow sense, I would say I am coming to this conclusion that perhaps there needs to be an expansion in understanding of what is democracy. In the narrow sense, it's just a form of government where political equality is the highest virtue. Virtue of that government. In the broad sense, virtue of democracy. In democracy, in broad sense, includes a way of life, a value system, a type of society. It is believed that without democratic society, democratic politics is a myth. That is broad sense, all right. And Ambedkar was skeptical about the future of democracy in India. Ambedkar believed that democracy is just the topsoil of India. in Grammar of Anarchy speech, he mentions that we are entering into the life of contradictions. These are really precious words. We are introducing political democracy, but India lacks a social and economic democracy. It is not enough to have one man, one vote. It is also necessary that there is one vote, one value. Of course, this is not a great statement that would break the current construct of the peak of the charam sim of democracy. One vote value, one vote one value तो अभी भी है, यही बोलेंगे. So this was not the right antidote. The antidote today is something else, not what Ambedkar had given. The ultimate value of democracy is the respect for human dignity. A democratic society is a society where there is a respect for the individuality, human dignity, freedom of speech and expression, respect for human dignity, individuality. Dignity and individuality are quite related. The culturalists actually try to reduce the value to be given to individualism, but provide more importance to cultural or communal identity, communitarian identity, not communalism directly, communitarianism. All right. So, a democratic society is a society where there is respect for individuality, humanity, dignity, etc. Toleration and pluralism. These are the values. But this is the highest value, and this is very closely related. Internally, they are made of the same thing: individuality and human dignity. There's no human dignity. I wouldn't say that. I think there's more to be explored here. Waves of democracy. Present age is an age of democracy. However, it is also known as the age of democratic confusion. There are various models of democracy. Samuel P. Huntington has explained the global expansion of democracy in form of three waves. First wave. The first wave represents the mature democracies in Western world. First reverse wave. Interwar period, when some countries of Europe like Germany, Italy came under authoritarianism. After the Second World War, democracy returned to the countries of Western Europe. Even democracy was established in former colonies India. Second reverse wave, with the exception of India, democracy collapsed in the Third World. India emerged as an island of democracy outside the Western world. With the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe, and the credit all goes to the constitution, not to the government of today. With the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe, democracy became almost universal, with few exceptions like China, North Korea, Cuba. This is the third wave, the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe. That means post 1991. Only major exception remains Arab world, Arab exceptionalism. You can also say that Arab Spring could have been the fourth wave. However, unfortunately, the geopolitical interest of USA converted Arab Spring into Arab Summer. Now, this is important to note. So we see the waves again. First wave, then first reverse, they say. First reverse happened between the two wars, 1939. So that means it was till 1919, the wave. Then second wave was after 1945. And second reverse was after that during the Cold War, collapse of many. And third was post collapse of USSR. So perhaps. And the fourth would be the Arab Spring. Fourth reverse would be the Arab Summer. What is currently going on? Is there a democracy wave or reverse wave? Currently, there is a lot of realism going on. Then there are two wars going on, major wars, and in the name of democracy, to truly and frankly say, this is the rise of right wing. But can we say that the rise of right wing is the opposite of democracy? We can say this much for sure, that this is the rise of right wing. But is the rise of right wing the rise of democracy, or the opposite, is the question mark. Anyway, we will come to all that discussion, because we have already begun. Democracy survived in India and not in other third world countries. Why? There can be many reasons. The preference of elites, like other countries. Indian leaders, Pandit Nehru had an opportunity to become authoritarian, yet his strong faith in democracy ensured that India remains democratic. True, the credit goes to the forefathers to set the discipline, to set the tone. Legacy of national movement, Indian freedom movement, was not just a movement for the liberation from the foreign rule. It was one of the largest civil rights movement in the world. Hence, there was consciousness with respect to rights among the people. And legacy of British introduced the institutions of parliamentary democracy, established a system of rule of law. Indian tradition, as explained by Amartya Sen, was of democracy. Indian argumentative Indian, he says. He was Buddha was a rebellion to Indian system, I would say. If we accept, and if we go by the Indian system that we think is Indian system right now, Buddha was Not that. Buddha was a rebellion. Buddha was a rebel out of that Indian system that we today proclaim to be the Indian system. If you consider Buddha also be a part of the Indian system, then you will clearly understand what's wrong with what's going on. Yet this strong faith in democracy ensured something. Indian tradition was explained by Amartya Singh. Constitutional provisions, example, freedom of press, independence of judiciary and election commission, size and diversity of the country. No other system would have worked here. Strict separation between civilian and military administration. Constitutional provisions, freedom of press, independence of judiciary and election commission. These are the institutions, independent institutions, constitutional provisions. Does this directly mean, or these have a huge role to play in safeguarding the democracy, democratic principles? Size and diversity of the country. No other system could have worked here. Acha. Strict separation between civilian and military administration. True. Institutions, strong institutions and their boundaries. Defined institutions, constitution. According to Farid Zakaria, the chance of success of democracy is higher in the societies where rule of law is established. First, and the universal adult franchise is introduced later. Oh, so the rule of law is like a safeguard, according to Farid Zakaria. You have to ensure that the population is to follow a rule, an order. Otherwise, if you take a random sample of nature, the state of nature, and you don't impose rule of law, and there's no concept of rule of law, there's no structure for the rule of law, and then you provide them universal adult franchise, what would happen? The politics of today, the way they are, exactly that would happen, I guess. But conceptually, as Farid Zakaria says, if there's a rule of law, there's a strict structure to control the population, and then an adult franchise, universal, is introduced, then what? According to him, constitutionalism should precede democracy. Example, Britain, rule of law became the part and parcel of British political culture much before the introduction. This is important. Introduction of democracy in Britain. It was a monarchy and still is in a way monarchy, whatever. But it was a monarchy with a rule of law. Interesting. Democracy collapsed in third world countries because of the absence of the democratic culture. It is to be noted that from the perspective of Western scholars like Christopher Jaffrelot, Indian democracy remains procedural democracy. In India, people are not under any rule of law. That's what I had said. They are under the rule of money. Thus, he points towards the use of money, muscle power, in Indian elections. It shows that India's procedural democracy is also far from being perfect, and there is still a long way to go before India gets the recognition of substantive democracy. Unfortunately, in terms of human development, India is lagging behind even its South Asian neighbors like Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. This is very good a collection. Somebody's good work. So India is a procedural democracy, not a substantive democracy. because rule of money and muscle, not rule of law, is what is established here. That's why the elections happen like this. Otherwise, we would have seen how the better kind of elections, I guess, in substantive democracy will happen, where there's a better sense of the prevalence of justice, the idea of justice here and here. This is a better one. In the next video, we're going to study about the theories of democracy.